So we have some, by the way, we only have good questions because I'm throwing away the bad questions. So, but some questions might be not so good because they're so big. Like here's one says, are you a skeptical environmentalist? And I was going to say that that term belongs to Bjorn Borg, who is an environmentalist. He believes in climate change, but he believes that there are problems that are coming up sooner, and that they're more cruel to people. Like, for example, lack of housing, poverty, clean water. And he believes that it's very expensive to successfully mitigate climate change. It's costly. And so he thinks that those funds should be expended on more immediate problems. Now, I'm a different kind of skeptical environmentalist in the sense that I think that we, in fact, cannot mitigate climate change. That it's too late. We have broken through the thresholds, and we should be dedicated to adapting to it. And that's important because it's very empowering to adapt to climate change because it's local. You know, in order to mitigate climate change, you have to arrange for the whole world to work together. You know, if you bicycle to work and the Chinese keep buying cars, it neutralizes. So everybody has to, as it were, bicycle to work. And that's going to be very difficult to achieve. But once you decide to adapt to the consequences of global warming, you can go about it very locally. And you can begin building a place locally that's more resilient, starting with your house, and then with your block, and then with your neighborhood, ultimately with your city and your region. And I would say that adaptation requires balance and completion. You need to have your daily needs, your weekly needs in very short proximity, so that if the systems outside of those sheds, system outside your watershed, system outside your energy shed, system outside your food shed, if they fall apart, because things will fall apart, then you nevertheless can bridge the problems. So I am a kind of environmentalist that I think is rare today, but it's going to become very commonplace in the future. Once it becomes clear that we have burst through the thresholds, and it's irreversible. Climate change is irreversible. So I'm skeptical of our ability to deal with environmentalism on a worldwide basis, but very, very optimistic about local response. Now, as a planner, of course, that's self-serving because a lot of the tools that we have in our toolbox work locally, and very few of them work globally. You know, the global toolkit required to save, basically to save all parts of the world forever is at the level of the United Nations or at the level of national governments. So we have, it's not very empowering for the mere urban planner. I can probably do that shorter. I'm torn between my long presentations, you know, and then short ones, but we'll see. Okay, can you list 3 positive lessons from the pandemic for urbanists and architects? Well, the pandemic is quite a lesson in itself. It has taught us quite a few things, such as which cities work better than others. It has taught us, I think, well, let me go straight to the positive, at least for quite a few people. It has taught us how healthy and wonderful it is to be outdoors. You know, how the sunlight and the breeze is healthy. And not just being indoors in bars and so forth. So it's taught us to use sidewalks, it's taught us to use cafes, it's taught us to walk around our neighborhood. It might even teach us to put windows back in schools. It is something that we think we do. Like I know that as an architect, I've always thought I was really good with sunlight and air and cross ventilation, right? I just assumed I was a good guy. So I just took that. It happened automatically when I designed something. Well, it turned out I didn't. It didn't. You have to actually begin with that. If you want to begin with a life that is lived outdoors, you can't just have it be whatever you have already designed and then you stick a porch on it. You don't stick a porch on anything. You begin with the design of the outside space and then you go in and design the residue is actually the dwelling. So for me, that was a real aha moment. How far I had moved away from understanding that houses have to at least have outdoor spaces and apartments. I mean, it's amazing what's happened to apartment buildings. When you look at Miami Beach, there are all these thin little slivers of apartments that you can't really inhabit. Nobody bothers to even have an 8-foot apartment. I mean, an 8-foot balcony. These very thin balconies on the outside are just ornamental. We've forgotten that actually the square balcony is something that you can inhabit. You can do exercise, you can do yoga outdoors, and so, and you have to take care that actually the sunlight comes in deep into your apartment, which means you need tall ceilings. You have to be positive about the roof deck. That top of your building can't just be for machines or something ornamental like a pitch roof. It's really useful. It's a great outdoor space. And the pandemic has reminded us of that. The other thing it's reminded us of is, well, frankly, that it matters where you live. And I'm not sure this is entirely positive, but if you have, of course, we live in Florida, so we're prejudiced, but we can be outdoors year round, and our schools can actually open up. And I think there's a kind of restructuring of geography that might happen again. And most people don't realize that with the pandemic of 1918, the Spanish flu, people started moving south to Florida, to Los Angeles, to the deserts of the Southwest. They moved to Spain. They moved to the Riviera, the French Riviera, before air conditioning. I think most people think that, with the invention of air conditioning, you could finally go to Florida. That's not true. Florida began in the 20s to develop very, very strongly. And that was a complete response to the Spanish flu in which there was no hope of vaccine. The only thing that saved you was open air and sunlight. They were very explicit about it. A few things happened, which are so interesting. The porch disappeared. The American porch disappeared and the terrace came in. Modern architecture came in because you could wipe it down, like these white walls here. You could wipe it down. You didn't want ornament. You didn't want wallpaper. You wanted furniture like this, that you could wipe out, not stuffed furniture. All this kind of thing, which is now permanently with us, came because of the Spanish flu. That's how it came in, and it became permanent. I think the question is, with the current pandemic, is to first confront that the effects are long-term, that it's not going to go away by next summer or next year. And even if it does medically, it is still going to leave a cultural memory that still reminds us about living outdoors and living simply. So the first lesson is to confront that this might be long-term, and the second lesson is to confront, so what is positive about it? Working at home is positive. What can we do to the house so that we just don't put a bunch of papers and computers on the dining room table? How does the house look as a live-work unit? I'm actually quite excited about having been reminded to do things that I used to do and that I thought I was still doing, but I really wasn't. I would design a dwelling and really not think about the workplace. I would design a bedroom and not think of it about a suite where you can actually live long-term with a family without driving each other crazy. Like a properly designed bedroom that was complex, not just a rectangle. but you know, that had bed place and a working place and a TV place I mean, when was the last time I designed a bedroom that actually had a carefully designed easy chair, you know, or enough storage to actually put the luggage, you know, that kind of thing. And I think the future bedroom is more of a suite. You know, it's easier for an older person to stay home, you know, to live at home because it's less dependent upon the public space in the middle. Those were a lot of aha moments thanks to the pandemic. So I'm pretty excited about it. It's not fashionable to do that. You have to be excited about only about the vaccine, but I'm also excited about what it does to architecture. What is your least favorite city and why? Well, I knew this question was coming, and I thought about it, and it's very hard to, you know, I was very clear about my favorite city and why. I began with that today, with the first question. My least favorite city is not so clear because there's always something about any place that makes sense. Like, for example, pretty much my least favorite city is some kind of suburban sprawl north of Dallas, okay? You know where the McMansions are? And traffic is hostile to pedestrians and the weather's tough outside. But I had the good fortune when I was very young to have a friend that lived out there in suburbia, in one of those McMansions. And I would, to find out about it, I said, I want to spend the weekend with you. You know, what do you do out there? He's a pretty young guy, about 30. And I went out with him. And it was as miserable as I thought. The commute was horrible. And then we arrived at his house, and I entered inside, and it was a paradise. The light was soft, the couch was huge, the frozen food was stacked in the double refrigerator. You know, the TV screen was this big. And as long as you stay inside, it's wonderful, like wonderful. And I had the insight that that's why people at the same time hate suburbia, don't want more of it, don't build any more out here. But I said, yes, but I thought you liked your place. Oh yeah, we like our place. I like living here. I just don't want more of it. I said, how is that possible? Well, what happens is the public realm in suburbia is awful, but the private realm is pretty wonderful. And I think most people I know who are urbanists have not confronted what a miracle the McMansion is as long as you're indoors. You know, it's fantastic. And for the price, incredible. I have cities, I know cities that are my least favorite in some ways, but they always have something that I really like. If I were to say that the city that I would dislike the most would be one that has crime. You know, I could be in a very beautiful, let's say, Latin American city, but if I couldn't go outside and walk at night without worrying, I would hate it. I'd say this is an awful place, I can't stand it. I had an experience in New Orleans where I used to go a lot. I had a house in New Orleans, and I loved it, and I loved it. And finally, the fact that when I went out at night, I had to think about it, and I had to look back, and I had to look around, really wore me down. And yeah, so that is a problem. I would say that crime, street crime, would be a big component of my least favorite city. However beautiful the buildings, you know, I think that would be a problem. I also find some cities unfriendly. People are just too busy in the streets, but that has nothing to do with the urbanism. There's just something about it. You know, you can't tell. So my least favorite city are the ones that would be crime-ridden, but I think every city has some terrific places. I don't mean to avoid the issue because it's an interesting question, but I don't have a least favorite city. What is your absolute favorite DPZ project, built or unbuilt? I've been asked that question before, and the answer is pretty simple. Because our projects are different, Some of them are affordable, and some of them are expensive, and some of them are on hills, and some of them are more environmental, etc. I would say, what kind of thing are you looking for? And within that realm of, I want to do a city that's a resort, or I want to do a city that's affordable, or I want to do a city that's green, I would say, well, my favorite of that kind of city or that kind of town, because we would be this one. And say, yes, so you're interested in hillside. Well, among our hillside projects, it's this one. And so I would have to answer that way. They're just specialized. And so it depends on what you're interested in. There's clearly no favorite city. In fact, some of my favorite cities go through periods in which I really hate them because they're misbehaving. They're in the hands of people who are not getting along or being abused by their developers. And it's like a child it's just gone bad, ran away from home, got into drugs, and is just having a terrible period as a teenager. And because our town plans really do evolve over time, they're a lot like kids, cute little beginning, oh, such a cute little town, terrible teenage years, and then eventually they settle down and, fly straight. I would say that's actually a truism. In the end, you hope they're not too damaged by their teenage years, and or that they're not too damaged. Sometimes they're damaged by recessions. They go through a recession, and the developer has to begin compromising, and that leaves a scar. So favorite and unfavorite depends on the history of the place. Have you observed any particular part of the planning process that consistently sells the project more than anything else? Okay, not being cynical, but what sells the project is selfishness. Okay, so let's say you're having a public meeting and you're describing something that's pretty great. It's going to be like this, it's going to be like that. All the neighbors say, well, that's pretty great, but it's not for me. It's not going to be, they're just going to be better than me. And I'm not saying explicitly more expensive. It's just going to be nicer to live there. So one of the things I try to do is describe a place in which they too have a chance to move in. And usually that has, since Americans move every 5 or 6 years, they're continually selling their houses, it's not impossible to do that. So it's not easy, but you have to describe a place as, this is also for you. It's not going to be in opposition to you. It is not a critique of the way you live, although it is. That's very hard to do. Almost everything we do is a critique of the existing condition. Implied, we don't have to mention it. They just can tell that it's not what they have and that it's better than what they have. So that's very difficult. But if you can say, well, this can form part of your life, you can walk in and use this town center. Or when you retire, this is a great place to retire. You can live above this store and have all your daily needs. So I think you should try to describe a place for people who say this is also for you. It's incredibly selfish of them. But if you say, well, these are for the cool people from New York that are going to come here, the so-called creative class, you're dead. Oh, what this city needs now is a creative class. And fuddy-duds living there say, you got to be kidding. This is definitely not for me. I don't want to be less cool than anybody. So be careful what you say. Try to make it very, very, very for the existing population. That'll work.